This is Logan Thomas, tight end for the Washington Commanders, and you're listening to the Best Bell Fantasy Podcast.
And welcome into episode 45 of the Best Bell Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Bradley Stalder, and joining me today, Fantasy Pros expert Andrew Erickson in the house. Welcome on in, Andrew. Happy to have you join me today.
Dude, thank you for having me on the show. I know I was actually supposed to come on last week, but you decided to have a fourth child, and I got
Not
kicked
me,
off.
my wife, you know.
That's true. I mean, well, you had an integral role in the process of creating this fourth child, and I got the short end of the stick. So now I'm on this week instead of last week, but hey,
you can blame Bradley from 9 months ago, you know.
Come on, Bradley.
Oh man. Yeah. So I mean, it was the beginning of football season back then, you know. I don't know, October.
Celebrating all those best ball wins.
Not yet. We've still got a few weeks to go until we kick off the season, but best ball, man, I'm in so many slow drafts right now. It's ridiculous. I don't know about you, but
yeah, I mean, every time, usually I usually get like a bunch of notifications. I'll be watching something with my fiance, and then I'll like check my phone and be like scrolling, like figuring out what I'm doing. And she's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm on the clock again." So I gotta get my fix in. We just finished watching a show, so like an hour and 30 minutes have gone by. So it's like, all right, now I gotta like draft. Like I'm on the clock in like 3 different places. I'm getting notifications saying that I'm on the clock, and I gotta take the time to make sure I get the right picks in.
Honey, I need to make sure I get my robust RB strategy in. Come on. Well, Andrew, glad to have you in. Today we're going to be talking about players that we feel are values at every round. And yes, they're like, I'm sure that you had difficult times in each of the rounds picking one player that we like. But Andrew and I are going to alternate between rounds. So we'll start with round one. And Andrew, I'm giving you the honors of giving us your round one value. And it's actually a surprising one for me. Tell me about your round one value pick.
I think for me, I chose Dalvin Cook. And it's because, last year at this time, Dalvin Cook was like the 102, like consensus 102. And I don't really know like how much has changed since that time. Like, I know that we've had other running backs, obviously overtake him in the rankings, but all the guy did was just run badly in terms of touchdown production. Like, he had been averaging closer to double-digit touchdowns the last 2 seasons prior to this past year. He was 4th in the NFL in goal line carries last year, and he only had 3 turned into touchdowns. Like, that's the thing. It's like Austin Eckler goes ahead of Dalvin Cook because Austin Eckler scored all the touchdowns last year, whereas we know that it's not really predictive year over year. It's like who's getting the goal line touches, and everything that Austin Eckler has said is that, like, guys, like I need a break. Like take some carries off of me, which depending on how good Isaiah Spiller is in this offense could come at, in the red zone, or Mike Williams could catch more touchdowns, and Austin Eckler just doesn't score 20 touchdowns again. So for me, Dalvin Cook, I mean, I think Adam Thielen is a guy who could potentially regress in terms of touchdowns. You look at Dalvin Cook, I like this Vikings offense a lot. New play caller coming in. So for me, Dalvin Cook, I think, is a value where you can get him at the back end of round one. And I love that. If I end up picking at like 8 or 9 and he's there, like that's the guy I'm usually going to.
Yeah, my projections right now have him at 330 rush attempts, projected over a course of 17 games. But if he's getting almost 20 carries per game, plus the goal line work, plus we expect this Minnesota offense to be better, I could see an upside play. He's also, I think the pushback for me and why I'm getting held up with Dalvin Cook is he's on the wrong side of the age model. He's in the middle of a second contract. Like we've seen those type of running backs fall off pretty quickly. And he's also had his injury issues. But like if there's a running back to have one more really huge year, it's Dalvin Cook. And maybe we're also, bitter from him not returning on value for 102 from last year. And you mentioned Austin Eckler, right, having so many touchdowns. It was Justin Herbert who was getting a lot of the goal line 2 years ago and not as much this year. So you see like the ebb and flow, the give and take. So I agree that there's going to be some touchdown regression for Dalvin Cook. So I like that call. Interesting. I'm really interested to see what this Vikings offense does come to fruition like year one from this LA Rams, like Kevin O'Connell, because we've seen them move fast pace when O'Connell was the OC back in LA. So yeah, I still think he has it, but I think there are some warning signs on my end that I'm a little concerned about.
Understandable.
Okay. Round 2. We'll keep it going. Round 2, Deandre Swift is my pick in the second round. He's going 15th overall. Deandre Swift is the archetype that you want to be targeting in. I know it's half PPR and underdog, but there are lots of full PPR tournaments. And in particular, Swift had 4. He was running back 4 in total running back receptions. He only played 13 games. Like he missed a quarter of the season and still was 4th in receptions, almost 5 per game, 8th in fantasy points per game. This is a player who we expect, the Lions to be in a better situation, and maybe they aren't going to share as much with Jamal Williams. Williams was a plotter last year, has always been a running back. Like, actually, it's funny, Andrew, if you look at fantasy points per game over the last 3 seasons, the running back 36 each season has been Jamal Williams.
I mean, it fits the stereotype that he is like an RB3. Like that's kind of like when you look at him, it's like he's definitely not bad enough to just be like totally worthless, but never good enough to be worthwhile.
Right. The big numbers for me are the efficiency numbers for Deandre Swift. He was 5th among all running backs in yards created and number 1 among all running backs in yards created per touch. He doesn't just do it between the tackles. And in fact, he was pretty inefficient between the tackles. It's when he gets outside and uses his speed that he's really useful. And so we can't predict injuries year to year. I think, especially for a running back like Deandre Swift, where the burden isn't going to be as high, we could see him being he's a possible league winner, just like Jonathan Taylor from last year.
I actually think that he profiles more like Eckler does in terms of, okay, like maybe he still doesn't, because Eckler still didn't have a insane workload. It was just really like the red zone usage that he got last year. And you're like, okay, because even Swift's rookie year, like they were giving the ball to Adrian Peterson. Like last year, they were like getting Jamal Williams like involved like at random times. So if they're just double down on, hey, use Jamal Williams in between the 20s, let's keep Swift fresh, use him in the red zone. I mean, Jared Goff was a quarterback on all those teams where Todd Gurley scored like 30 touchdowns. So if this Lions offense can be fringe like top 12, which they have good offensive line, Jared Goff is good enough when they put pieces around him. I mean, he's been on offenses that have been top of the league. It seems like the play caller he understands how to use the certain players. Like you throw Jameson Williams into the mix when he's healthy. It's like
throw him on Ross St. Brown, opens up the offense for sure.
Exactly. So I like this offense. And even like if you look at team ADP, like the Lions are not like a bottom offense. Like they're in the top 16. I believe like they're like 15th or 16th the last time I ran the numbers on their like aggregate ADP. And that indicates to me like the market's not like oh, Lions are a horrible offense. It's like the Lions aren't sure. And last year, you know what team was right in the middle in terms of team ADP? The Los Angeles Chargers. Austin Eckler. Like that. So that's kind of how I see Swift as. And Eckler was kind of like a guy like went at the back end of round 1 in PPR, like beginning of round 2 in half point PPR. So I know you said Jonathan Taylor, but like I think like Eckler is like the comp I could see with Swift. So I like the call in round 2.
Well, okay, I see what you're saying. My thought was that 1-2 turn, that he was being drafted at. But I guess Eckler was, I was drafting so many high stakes leagues last year that he was getting like pushed up. But that 1-2 turn last year, I keep kicking myself because I was not drafting enough Jonathan Taylor at that turn. So I think there are some league winning running backs going at that turn, and Swift could be among them. Round 3, Andrew, let's get to your pick. Who do you think is the most valuable draftable player in round 3?
Well, maybe not most. I mean, like I just look at Nick Chubb as like a good value in round 3, and it's because I don't see a scenario, whether Deshaun Watson plays all the games, whether he plays no games. Like, I don't see a scenario where Nick Chubb, you draft him and you're like, man, that pick totally destroyed my draft. Like, I don't think that's possible. Like, every time you take Nick Chubb, like, you're going to get a back end RB1 pretty much no matter what. And, the room for upside is now there with Deshaun Watson potentially playing. And if it's down the stretch, okay, like Deshaun Watson plays the last 6 weeks and then Chubb goes on this monster tear because, when you look at Chubb, like, that's really what you're hoping for. Like, he has to score a lot of touchdowns. And that's possible if this offense is run with Deshaun Watson at quarterback and not necessarily Jacoby Brissett. But if Jacoby Brissett's the quarterback, okay, so now Nick Chubb will probably meet his ADP at RB13. And it's like, you got a steady body that put up production every single week. No, he didn't catch a lot of passes. But he's probably not also going to break down either because he's not a volume monster. So from like a value standpoint, like, it's weird because I really haven't been drafting a lot of Nick Chubb, but it's because of the way that a lot of things are set up in terms of like how I'm drafting.
Right.
But I'm never going to look back and think, man, like, where did I go wrong in this draft? I was drafting Nick Chubb in round 3. Like, that was horrible. Like, because there are a lot of receivers that you're going to take in those rounds that could potentially flame out and just aren't the guy that is like, this year's Cooper Kupp or whatever. But Nick Chubb, from a value standpoint, I think is easily going to pay off. And then you have the room for him to give you more, depending on how things shake out with Watson.
And shake out in the running back room right now. Maybe it's Kareem Hunt who leaves. Maybe it's Dearness Johnson. But it seems like every month, one of those running backs is on the trade block on Twitter, that someone is not going to make the team. And we've seen what Nick Chubb can do. And if any of them go down, we've seen what Nick Chubb did as the 70% snap share runner instead of just 45%.
Right. And at the end of the day, like, he's really, like, you just know he's really good. Like, you don't, like, the bottom is not going to fall out on Nick Chubb unless he suffers like a devastating injury. Like, he's going to go out, average 5 yards per carry, probably not catch many passes and score like 10 touchdowns. And then you're done. so it's like in round 3, like outside the top 12 running backs, like you can get that. It's like it's really hard to beat that type of value in round 3.
Can't do it. Can't beat it. In round 4, I like another running back. I feel like we've been going running back heavy to start this draft.
We're doing robust RB, baby.
Let's go, baby. I believe in Breece Hall, and I've gone on a lot of shows, and I've said Breece Hall, pounding the table, Breece Hall. And this is a running back who over the last 2 seasons at Iowa State, 1,400 and 1,500 rushing yards, 23 total touchdowns each of those last 2 seasons. And he's a running back who's capable of catching the ball. He can do everything that Michael Carter can do, but better. And the Jets traded up to get him. This is an ascending Jets offense. They're going to be in the red zone, scoring more often. And you have to love the talent of Breece Hall. So all of these things, he's young. They've invested a lot of draft capital in him. And looking at historically, the running backs, the last 6 years, the running back, the first running back off of the rookie draft board in the NFL has finished as the running back 8 or higher 5 of those last 6 seasons. The only rookie to not do that is Clyde Edwards-Helaire, which we know that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is like a man. He's, as the kiddos say, mid. He's a mid running. That's mid. But we know that Breece Hall is certifiably a good running back. And with an ascending Jets offense, you have to be a little bit more bullish on, I want the lead back. He's going to be in scoring opportunities. He can catch the ball and he can run between the tackles. He has all the profile that you need. And for him to be going anywhere in the 4th round, I feel is a value.
I agree. I think that he's a great pick in those rounds. And look, is it going to be like in week 1, he's going to come out and have like 25 touches? Like, probably not. Like, it'll probably take some time for him to take over the backfield, like, entirely in the way that it works. And, the Jets have a horrible schedule to start the year. Like, weeks 1 through 8, they could literally be 0-8. Like, that's totally possible. But I think that what they're going to find out is, yeah, like, Michael Carter, like, does some things well. And then it's like, wow, like, the offense is like way better when Breece Hall is like touching the ball like more. And I think they're just going to it's going to force their hand. Like, I know a report came out that says it was going to be like 60-40, like Breece Hall, Michael Carter. Like,
sure, I'll take 60%.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, that's how like most running back things are operate anyway. If he hits, 14, 15 touches per game, which is basically what the Jets RB1 last year was. That's 250 touches. And when you get to 250 touches, you're a top 15 running back. And, that's where Breece Hall is probably going to end up finishing at the end of the day. And then there's room for more because he's young and he's talented and he's a 3-down skill set. So, and he's only going in round 4 just because of the unknown and because he plays on the Jets. So we're going to be talking about Breece Hall next year as probably like a 2nd-round pick. So I love it.
Oh, delicious. Delicious. All right, round 5, hit us, Andrew. Who's your round 5 value?
Round 5 was tough for me. Like, this is a round I struggle with consistently. I think all my best ball drafts that I do, I'm just like there's no one that's I love this guy. I see players that look like values versus all right, I'm trying to weigh do I go for a breakout player here? Do I go for
for a reference, in round 5, these are the players you had to pick from. Okay, you had Jerry Jeudy, Lamar Jackson, Brandon Cooks, Rashad Bateman, George Kittle, Patrick Mahomes, DK Metcalf, I mentioned Rashad Bateman, Juju, Darnell Mooney, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Kyler Murray. And you went with?
Yeah, so I ultimately settled on Mooney, just looking at it from a value perspective. I think that he was the one that kind of popped out to me. Him and Brandon Cooks are the guys I feel pretty confident about how their target share is going to shake out. I think that Mooney actually has a little bit more upside just based on, I think that Justin Fields is a better quarterback than Davis Mills. I think that Mooney's entering year 3. So it's there's still untapped potential with him. Whereas Cooks, yeah, every year we talk about him being a screaming value, but I saw Brandon Cooks going the 4th round one, in a mock draft. And I'm I'm not paying up to get Brandon Cooks.
Right.
I'll take Brandon Cooks if he falls to me, which is what has been traditionally his case over the past 5 years. He's always been a round 8 guy, a round 9 guy. But now it's people are finally oh yeah, Brandon Cooks is been good this entire time. Let's draft him where he's supposed to. And now I'm cool. I don't have to draft anyone from the Texans. Fine by me. So I like Mooney particularly just because I think his median projection I think is pretty good, and there is room for him to grow. As a guy entering year 3 with breakout potential. He's a small school guy, but we've seen this from a lot of these players, especially someone that's a finesse route runner like Mooney. Not a lot of target competition, and I think his skill set fits in well with Justin Fields. But I will say, I was teased a little bit by the quarterbacks here as well. I think that round 5 is kind of that sweet spot. Usually I'm just kind of waiting for who is left over. So if it's Mahomes that's left, I'll take him, or Lamar, or Kyler, or Hurts. Especially in the best ball format where I kind of really want to try to get one of these top 6 guys, round 5, round 6 is kind of where I feel all right, I can pull the trigger on my QB1 here.
Yeah, Mooney is, I feel he's a really solid, wide receiver 3. If you're all set with, and you're getting him in round 5, so that's probably where you're comfortable, gaining a Mooney, because you've already drafted probably your number 1 running back. You probably drafted 2 wide receivers, maybe another tight end, or maybe another wide receiver. He's gonna fill in that wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 spot for you on a pretty consistent basis. And if Fields can take a step, then Mooney can take a step into scratching into that wide receiver 1 territory that we haven't seen him get there. There hasn't been a 25-point fantasy game for Darnell Mooney yet, but I mean, how could you when you're playing with Matt Nagy at this point? So hopefully, this next year Fields can take the step. And that was one of the profiles about Fields coming out of the NFL draft last year, was he's really accurate downfield, and his average depth of target was really, really far, especially this year. Or this past year when Nagy had him throwing and running the Andy Dalton offense. So it was meeting the upside of Mooney, but the offense wasn't good. And so hopefully he can take that next step and, as you mentioned, scratch into that upside. Okay. Round 6. My pick here is Adam Thielen. And I know that you mentioned Thielen earlier as a touchdown regression candidate, but here's the thing. That's his trademark. That's what he does. He's paid the big money to score the touchdowns. 2018, 9 touchdowns. 2019, 6 touchdowns in 10 games. 2020, 14 in 15 games. 10 last year in 13 games. This is a player who is targeted heavily in the red zone, in the end zone, and still gets a 21% target share. But his red zone share was only 22%, meaning that when the bulk of his receptions that are touchdowns are right there in the end zone. So even though he's not the 20-10 guy, He's like the goal line wide receiver, almost like a Mike Evans. Like he's discount Mike Evans in that sense. And while we may have seen some injuries slow him down these past couple of years, I'm not buying Adam Thielen's dust. Adam Thielen's going to fall off a cliff right now. And I want pieces of this Minnesota offense. So if I miss out on Jefferson early in my drafts, I'm taking Thielen and stacking him with Kirk Cousins because I think that that's inexpensive.
All right. Well, you did mention that Dalvin Cook was past the age model. I'm pretty sure Adam Thielen is also past the age model at what is he? He's 33, right?
He's not even 32 yet.
What?
Yeah, he's 31.9.
Okay, he's entering his age 32 season. We agree to disagree. But, I mean, that's the thing. There's just how many receivers are this productive? I mean, who was 32 last year going around 4? Julio Jones. Yeah, he was horrible. His efficiency, so I guess for me, it's like, yes, you want to get pieces of this Vikings offense, but we also know this Vikings offense is going to be in 3 wide receiver sets. So why don't I just take KJ Osborne? Like, he was efficient with his targets last year. And if Thielen doesn't score your touchdowns, like I talked about, like, is Thielen going to just continue to score more touchdowns than Justin Jefferson, who's on a rocket ship to the moon with the talent that he has? Like, that's my pushback. And I know we've agreed for the most part on some of these guys, but Thielen is, like, he's a fade for me. Like, I don't want to take him in round 6 because I think that he's going to fall off. Like, just the track record of a lot of these guys over age 32 has just not been good. And he was dealing with injuries last year. And it's a new offense where he's not just competing with one receiver, and now he's competing with 2 receivers. Usually it was 2 tight ends that he was competing for targets with, and now it's receivers. So, yeah, I'm just not on Thielen.
Fair enough. We got to have a little bit of disagreement here, or else everyone will think that we're in cahoots together.
Exactly.
This is the whole bit. So that's my round 6. Round 7, you actually have 2 of them. One of them I really like, one of them I don't like. So we got to give the people what they want here. Come on, look at my background. What do you think, Andrew?
Right, exactly. Okay, so Alan Lazard is one of those guys that I was looking at here. I'm trying to find my sheet that I have misplaced. I'm just like, who are the 2 players that I was talking about anyway? Okay,
yes,
there we go.
Lazard and Michael Thomas.
Yeah, Lazard and Michael Thomas. So I wanted to hit on Lazard because I think that he's like a hot topic in terms of like people thinking that he just like sucks at football. And okay, sure, like his efficiency numbers like aren't like this miraculous thing, but you know his particular case reminds me so much of Russell Gage going into last year, where people were like Russell Gage sucks. Like his efficiency is like as bad as AJ Green. He's horrible. And it's like, well, hey, maybe he just like he could get better. Like that is still like a possibility. And that's kind of why like Lazard is someone that I think I think that he is a value, like where he's going as Aaron Rodgers' number 1 wide receiver. I think that alone has a lot of fantasy value. And people just want to point to, oh, well, he's not going to be efficient. Like he's not actually good in real life. It's like, well, he was pretty good over the last 5 weeks of the season when he was wide receiver 8 and he caught 5 touchdowns. And like, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for who's going to catch the touchdowns from Aaron Rodgers. And he trusts Alan Lazard. Like, Christian Watson, dude, like, this guy looks like he's going to do absolutely nothing his rookie year. Like, from the FBS, he's already hurt. Like, I don't know how many. I mean, Sammy Watkins might outproduce Christian Watson at this point.
Romeo Dubes. Have you heard about the Dubes?
Romeo Dubes. I'm a big fan of Samori Toure, actually. The 7th rounder. I liked him a lot coming out of the. So hopefully in preseason DFS at least we can get some Samori Toure action going.
Preseason loves.
Yeah, exactly. But with Lazard or Lazard, I think that he can just become a better player. Like, he knows that he's going to have to step up this year. He's going to take on a bigger role, and I think that he's up for the challenge. And it was a blind spot for me with last year with Gage when, there was an opportunity that they traded Julio Jones away, and I was like, dude, like, Gage sucks. Like, I'm not, like, drafting this guy. And he was still super cheap because people were just, like they would not buy into the fact that, oh, this could be a player that could actually improve, into a bigger role on the offense. So I think that Lazard could improve. And is he going to be like a league winner? Like, probably not, because I think that, his profile, like his athletic ability, whatever, like it's probably going to cap him in some way, shape, or form. But the fact that he's the offensive situation that he's in, I think is going to make him a value at the end of the day. And I think that's always important to like distinguish the difference between like a league winning player and like a value player. Like Brandon
yeah.
Cooks is never going to be. I hate to bring up with the Brandon Cooks, but he's just like a good reference point because everybody kind of like we all kind of agree like what he is. It's like Brandon Cooks is not a league winner, but like at the right cost, like he's a great value. So
he will fill in a necessary spot for your lineup.
Exactly, but you're not going to win your fantasy football league because you draft Brandon Cooks. Like, I don't think you're going to win your fantasy football league because you draft Allen Lazard. Now, comparing Lazard to someone like Kadarius Toney, like Toney could be a league winner, but he could also do absolutely nothing for your roster. Where Lazard, I don't see that in his range of outcomes really, unless he gets hurt. I think that he's going to be a solid value. So, long story short, yeah, that was my defense of Lazard. I'll hit on Michael Thomas quickly. It's just the fact that he's going as outside the top 40 receivers, like wide receiver 41, I believe was his ADP. It's probably going to increase a little bit, but these are the numbers he was putting up the last time he was healthy in 2020. So not even referring back to 2019. So from a production standpoint, he's kind of being drafted, I think, pretty close to his floor. And I mean, we've seen this before with some of these receivers. They come back with different quarterbacks. Jameis Winston, we've seen fuel wide receiver ones. And if Michael Thomas is healthy, then I mean, I can't say I don't want pieces of him at a wide receiver 40 cost when I've seen this guy be a fantasy wide receiver 1 for so many seasons.
Well, I love the Michael Thomas take. I think he's the type of wide receiver that has irreplaceable upside. Like you mentioned, when we last saw him, even he was struggling with his injuries, he was getting a 25% target share. Like, yeah, it was Drew Brees, but it was old Drew Brees who could barely throw the ball, right? And so Michael Thomas still, I think, is an extreme value. And if he's going to be on the field for the Saints, look out. And I love, this is going to get me in a lot of trouble, but Jameis Winston is, I think his ceiling this year is like Matthew Stafford, Aaron Rodgers. Like in that back end quarterback 1, maybe high end quarterback 2, if he's got Thomas, Landry, Olave, Taysom Hill messing around, as well, Kamara, like there is a path to success for Jameis Winston and Michael Thomas for the Saints. But I'm going to push back on Lazard, and I have his side jersey in the back, okay, as the Green Bay Packers truther, but also a Russell Gage truther. And that's a dangerous thing to do here, Andrew, is make the comp between Russell Gage and Allen Lazard. Because you mentioned 2020 Russell Gage. Gage, 7 of his 16 games in 2020, a 20% target share or more. Last year, Allen Lazard had 2 such games. The median target share in 2020 for Gage was 17%. Gage last season was 12%, the median target share. I think it's really hard for me to see Lazard jump from a 12, 13, 14% share to like 17 to 20% share. It's hard for me to see that jump happen. And maybe you're making the Brandon Cooks argument, well, he'll fill in a useful spot for you, and maybe he will. I mean, we've seen Aaron Rodgers lean on his guys and hyper target his number 1. I wish I would have seen that more, though, for me to be confident in Allen Lazard taking the leap. Maybe it's Robert Tonyan getting some love when he comes back from the injury in the red zone. Maybe Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. A.J. Dillon had like 35 catches last season. I don't know who it is, but I'm worried that Lazard isn't going to be what you're wanting him to be in round 7.
Well, I guess my and this is something my one question for you, a follow-up question.
Yeah,
This is something I was thinking about with like Chiefs offense as we're like trying to figure out like, all right, who's it going to be? Like who's going to get all the targets in the Chiefs offense? It's like the number one question everybody wants to answer, not named Travis Kelce. Who's the next guy?
Right.
And question I did an article on FantasyPros, and the question I kind of came out of it was, maybe we're not asking the right question here. Maybe we shouldn't be asking like who's going to catch all or who's going to see the most targets. Maybe it should be like, who's going to catch double-digit touchdowns? Like, because isn't that the reason why we like the Chiefs receivers? Because they play in a good offense.
Yes.
And, like, what is the benefit of playing in a good offense? Is getting touchdowns. Like, there are plenty of offenses that throw the ball a ton. Jacksonville last year threw the ball a ton. Didn't help anybody. Because it was, like... And so that's, I think, maybe another question with the Packers, who we all expect to kind of be more of a run-heavy approach. I mean, the 2 best players on offense, I think, are their 2 running backs. So It makes sense that the overall passing volume in this offense is probably not going to be that high anyway. So is Lazard going to be like flirting with double-digit targets every week? Like, no, like probably not. And the fact that you talked about his target share, he's just really never been a guy that's commanded a high target share. But the thing that he has done is catch touchdowns.
He does.
And with Robert Tonyan also coming back off an injury, like who is Rodgers going to trust to throw the ball to into the end zone? And it's so clear that guy is Lazard. So if Lazard's target share, I know we talked about Thielen being a cheap version of Mike Evans. What about Alan Lazard being the cheapest version of Mike Evans attached to Aaron Rodgers?
We are getting really, really cheap. Well, you mentioned the touchdowns, and I'm looking at my projections right now. I have Lazard leading the team in targets and leading the team in touchdowns. So I have him projected at 67 receptions, 103 targets, 7.5. So between 7 and 8 touchdowns on the year. But the issue I have is it's so spread out. Like he leads the team in targets at only a 17% share is my projection for him.
Well, isn't that what Mike Evans had in the Bucs offense last year?
Yeah, well, there's a difference of about 150
pass
attempts.
Right. But there's also a difference in ADP. Like he's round 2 and Lazard is round 8.
I also think that that's a little low for Mike Evans. I think he'll bounce back a little bit from that. But interesting points. I like the volume there.
Yeah, I mean, and these
7.
are like kind of just like coming off the cuff. Like I wasn't like I know that Bradley's going to say this, so like I'm ready. It's just like, and this is why I like having these open discussions,
right?
Because I can think more intuitively about certain situations and players. Because as much as we want fantasy to be black and white, it is friggin' gray all over the place, man. And that's why you got to talk it out. So I love it.
Well, and it's not just like one player has one number. It's that they could have a wide range of numbers. And like, could Lazard have 5 touchdowns? Probably not, only if he gets injured. But you mentioned he could flirt with double-digit touchdowns if things roll right. I mean, 7.5 could be 10 over the course of a season, especially if Tunion's not back and maybe one of the running backs get injured. Like there's a path to Lazard being fantasy useful and make it like being a staple of your fantasy lineups. You're confident putting him in there. So there's a path to it. Round 7, I'd lean Michael Thomas.
Fair enough. That's why I put both guys, because I was like, Lazard's a very debated guy, and I wanted to talk about it. So yeah, but Thomas, I think, is the value right now with him. I think is can't be beat.
All right, my round 8 value, and finally we do get to a quarterback. Dak Prescott is my round 8 value. He's going as the quarterback 11 off the board, and I know he lost Amari Cooper, but not all, like sometimes what is the phrase, by subtraction? Yeah. Not that like Amari Cooper is a bad player, don't get me wrong, but the fact of the matter is he's a slightly above mid. Okay, a 22% target share, an older aging player who we saw struggle with injury last season. And regardless of what like personality wise we think about Dak Prescott, he's always risen to the challenge. Last year, he finishes the quarterback 9 in fantasy points per game, coming off a devastating knee injury. Like we've seen within the range of outcomes for Dak Prescott, him being not only the number 1 quarterback overall, but the number 1 quarterback by a lot. We saw a huge passing volume in 2020 before the injury. And then back in 2019, he was the quarterback 3 in fantasy points per game. I think that CeeDee Lamb is going to take a little bit of a step. I don't think like 27% target share, but Jalen Tolbert is going to be really good. Like you talk about a young Adam Thielen, Jalen Tolbert, baby. And then Dalton Schultz as well. They're going to be fantasy useful pieces such as Tony Pollard. Is like Dak will find a way to make it happen in this Dallas offense. And I think quarterback 11 is just a reflection of people reacting to, oh, he lost to Amari Cooper, therefore he's not going to be as good. No, like there are still very good pieces on this Dallas offense. I'm not worried at all about Dak. And in fact, he had a career low in rushing yards aside from 2020 when he hurt his knee. Career low in rushing yards last season. He's going to be running a little bit more. He had like 270 rushing yards each of his first 4 seasons. I think that he'll be running the ball, running in some touchdowns. I don't know if he'll get to 37 passing touchdowns like he did last year, but at quarterback 11, that's a value.
Yeah, I think that with the quarterbacks, it's just so important to have them in your tiers and understand like where the value pockets are. Like you just want to take the last guy in your tier. And I really think that's kind of the winning strategy. At least that's what I've done it. And that way you get exposure to different guys. Cause it's like, you're nitpicking because there are scenarios you can see Dak Prescott in a very high-paced offense, like having a top 5 season, and then the same thing with like Brady and like Stafford and like the second crop of guys. But we've seen Dak, be a top 5 quarterback before, and the only reason I think that he's kind of, like you mentioned, like kind of fallen in the perception is because everyone else's like teams like got better and like added pieces, and like the Cowboys just like really didn't. Like their offensive line is not as good as it's been in the past. Like losing a big name like Cooper and replacing him with potentially question marks at option. Michael Gallup is coming off an injury, so it's like Slam has to like take a massive step, I think, for people to get convinced about Dak. When in reality, it's like, I mean, if this offense is running as fast as we all think it can, then it's really not going to matter in the long run.
I mean, did you see Tony Pollard lining up in the slot? Oh, baby.
Tale as old as time, man. I still can't get Duke Johnson out of the slot out of my mind.
All right, Andrew, hit us with your round 9.
I continually just draft this guy in round 9 whenever I like kind of punt off the running back position. It's Devin Singletary for the Buffalo Bills. I mean, RB3 over the final 6 weeks of the season. And it's one of these things where the fantasy market just doesn't adjust to these late season surges, and they just kind of like write it off. And that really hasn't worked out well. Like when Leonard Fournette, he had a season surge at the end of 2020. We all just kind of like, yeah, well, whatever, it doesn't really matter. And then that was just wrong. And then like Fournette just like was on fire the rest of the season. So I think that Singletary kind of falls in a similar bucket where you have a guy playing a really high powered offense and he's been efficient. Like Devin Singletary has been an efficient running back. PFF's 4th ranked running back in terms of rushing over 15 yards, 7th in terms of forced missed tackles since 2021. Like he's efficient on the ground. Is the pass catching there? Not really. But if there's anyone that can overcome a running back that's not used as a receiver, it's playing in the offense that throws the ball a ton and is going to end like that in itself is going to make Singletary stumble into receptions on some of these early downs while James Cook, gets acclimated to the offense. Like we don't know like how big James Cook's role is going to be. I mean, the team was looking to sign J.D. McKissick, and I can tell you there's no way that McKissick's ADP would be the same as James Cook's. Like that not would have been the case here in Buffalo. So Singletary, just I have learned in the past where it's like I wasn't not valuing enough those like late season surges, and I'm not letting that happen again. Like Singletary is the lead back for the Buffalo Bills, and that sounds like a winning formula, especially in round 9. Like he doesn't even need to be good for the entire season for him to pay off that ADP.
Yeah, those last 4 weeks when he was the running back 7, 10, 5, and 3 in full PPR, he had a total of 10 targets. Right. He wasn't doing it through the air. He was doing it on the ground. And so I haven't drafted a lot of Singletary, but I think you're pointing out something that people need to listen to. Like the role in which James Cook is going to fill. Maybe that's the reason why we should be fading Gabriel Davis.
Gabriel Davis did not make it onto our list because it's definitely because he's really not a value in round 4.
He's not a value.
I think we can all admit to that, though.
Look, I tweeted out to Connor O'Driscoll. I tweeted out that I finally took a share of Gabriel Davis at pick 51. Okay, round 5, finally. But I was seeing Gabe Davis sneak into the back end of the 3rd round. I just can't do it.
Oh my god!
And
it's funny, when I think one of the first pre-draft best ball drafts I did here on your show, and I drafted Gabriel. I actually checked. I drafted Gabriel Davis at 78 overall in that draft, and at that time, I was even like, "Man, is this a little expensive?" Which is like so funny to think about now. In retrospect, you're like, "Whoa, 78! Like, what a steal!"
And then you were like, well, I don't know how I feel about it.
Right,
He
exactly.
Cedric Wilson. That was the take you took.
Yeah, exactly.
On the pod last time. And that was gold. It was absolutely gold. But the median target share last season, I know we're taking a tangent for a second, but Gabriel Davis's median target share last season was 10.5%. 10.5%. And I know that he, like when Emmanuel Sanders was out, it was like 26, 21, 18. Like he was getting more targets, but he has a 50% catch rate. So
Well, we have more Bills wide receivers to talk about. So.
Yes, we do. We do. All right. So that was round 9, Devin Singletary. I think I'm going to have to start drafting more Singletary. For me in round 10, Tim Patrick. And I'm surprised that Tim Patrick is here because he out-targeted Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton last year. And that's crazy to me. I mean, but he's going, what did I say? Round 10. Sutton's back end of round 3 right now, and Jeudy is round 4. How sure are we that it's not Tim Patrick who's the number 2, if not the number 1 among the wide receivers? Like, I can't say that with confidence that it's going to be Sutton. Like, I'd love it to be. It's probably Jeudy, but I think it's a lot closer than what the ADPs are saying.
No, I think that Patrick is the ultimate. You take one of those Broncos receivers and you want the other one to be Tim Patrick. And then you hope that the other guy is the one that flames out. And if you miss out on, and like you said, like, there are some drafts I can't draft Cortland Sutton because he gets taken before I get to pick. So when that happens, it's like, well, I guess I'll take Tim Patrick in round 10. So I'm happy with that.
I mean, my projection for Patrick is 16% target share, 860 yards, between 7 and 8 touchdowns.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that, and this is why like Jeudy, I just like have so much trouble getting behind, is that not only is Sutton like a better touchdown guy than Jeudy, like so is Tim Patrick. Like that's why Tim Patrick's outproduced Jeudy the last 2 years, because of touchdowns. So like that's why you want the quarter. That's like the appeal of Russell Wilson as your quarterback, not because he's like the super accurate like quarterback. Like Teddy Bridgewater was accurate too. And that's why Jeudy was good from a target share perspective last year with Teddy Bridgewater, because Bridgewater was accurate. But, like, he never threw the ball to the freaking end zone, like, ever. And that's not the case with Russell Wilson. Like, that's all Russ does, is drop moon balls into the end zone down the field. And that just fits stylistically more towards Sutton and towards Tim Patrick. So, yeah, I love the call.
And also the catch rates, right? Like, Sutton and Jeudy have about the same catch rate, but the average target distance so much. Like there's such a Sutton so much further down the field than Jeudy. So when you have Tim Patrick, who's catching almost 70% of the passes thrown his way, like that's almost Tyler Lockett to me.
It's going to be fun to watch.
Oh boy. All right. Hit us with round 11. Oh, I just saw it. I'm so excited. Please tell me about your round 11.
Oh, I like Cole Kmet for the Chicago Bears. I'm touting Bears here as values, and I just look at it from tight ends just need targets. Like that's really all I'm looking for. I don't need necessarily someone to break the mold. And last year, you look at guys that were really good in expected fantasy points per game, but really bad in terms of production. It was Zach Ertz and Dawson Knox, and both those guys showed out this past season. So that's all I'm kind of looking at. I'm like, who's a tight end that's going late that has like an opportunity to potentially lead his team in targets? Like it's impossible for Cole Kmet to fall into that range. So that's all I'm really looking for. Like tight end, like if you can't get an elite guy, like I think Cole Kmet's your next best bet.
I love it. He's a sleeper pick for me to be a top 6 in PPR among all tight ends. The target share and create like touchdown regression, Justin Fields taking a step forward, all of it. And like no competition. What is it? Byron Pringle? Like
N'Keal Harry?
Stop.
Dude, he's so bad.
Gosh.
Oh my God.
Oh, no, we're both on the Kmet train. We'll keep it moving. We want to get through 18 rounds in the next couple minutes. So my round 12, Jamison Crowder, wide receiver 63 off the board, 138th overall. Here's my argument for Crowder. I just think he's better, and he's been better for a long time. Since 2017, excluding last year when he was hurt, since 2017, he's had at least a 20% target share on every team he's played on in every season. He's going to be the slot receiver. I know that there's some rumblings. Oh, Isaiah McKenzie, blah, blah, blah. Isaiah McKenzie has always been a gadget guy, and he's only stepped in when Cole Beasley was hurt. Because you know what? Jamison Crowder, if you look at playerprofiler.com, the player profiler comp is Cole Beasley. He's just 4 years younger. This is the type of player that they went out and brought in, and I'm not believing Khalil Shakir either. That's going to be 2023 and beyond. Jamison Crowder this year, even in 2021 last season, still a 21% target rate. So he's going to get run out of the slot, and we've seen the slot receiver for Buffalo be very fantasy useful. So I think getting a part of this Buffalo offense out of the slot round 12 at wide receiver 63, like it's going to be hard for Jamison Crowder to fail outside of injuries.
Round 13 for me, I'm going with Gerald Everett, tight end for the Los Angeles Chargers. And last year, he was actually tight end 9 fantasy points per game during the second half of the season when Russell Wilson came back from injury. And I just think that based on what he did last year was basically the same exact production that Jared Cook put up, except one of them was playing in the Chargers offense and one of them was playing in the Seahawks offense. And now it's just like flipped on its head. So whatever Cook did last year, I think is like Everett's like stone cold floor. And that was tight end 16. So Everett, I don't understand like why people aren't more excited about him. He's put in the Chargers offense. Like that's like all the selling point that I need for a tight end. And Everett is a talented guy. Like he's athletic. I know like people are knocking Dalton Schultz for not being like this uber athletic tight end. Like that's not Gerald Everett. Like Everett is a guy that can break tackles and make plays and be used down the field. So, there's question marks about who the wide receiver 3 is. Is it Palmer? Are they going to use Jalen Guyton? But like, I feel pretty good about the tight end 1 being Gerald Everett in an offense that's going to throw a lot of passing touchdowns and ranked in terms of passing attempts last year. They're ranked 3rd. They're ranked 9th in tight end targets overall. Last year, Everett was on an offense that ranked last in passing attempts. So yeah, I'm going to go with
last in pace of play, last in pretty much everything.
Yeah, like a situation where basically there was no chance of him thriving whatsoever, and now he's in the exact opposite situation. So I like Everett in round 13.
Okay. I like him too. Good pick. What a value. Round 14, I'll throw another tight end your way, and that's David Njoku. He's going as tight end 21 off the board, 167th overall. He was tight end 24 in fantasy points per game last season, behind Austin Hooper. Hooper's not there anymore. I know they're going to run some 2 tight end sets with Harrison Bryant, but it's going to be David Njoku who signed a massive extension this offseason. And we've seen him be a top 10 tight end before, back in 2018, his sophomore season. 814 air yards, 639 receiving yards, only on 4 touchdowns. This is a player who is an athletic freak, big dude. And it doesn't matter who the quarterback's going to be. If it's Deshaun Watson, wheels up. But if it's Jacoby Brissett, we've seen Jack Doyle be a low-end tight end 1 in the Colts offense. And David Njoku is a lot better than Jack Doyle. So wheels up for David Njoku in round 14. Like, I feel like if I'm not taking tight end early, I'll just wait for the Gerald Everett's, David Njoku's of the world.
Yeah, no, I like the call with Njoku. I mean, Jack Doyle, like, not only was like a tight end 1, but like he was like leading the team in targets and like receptions. Like, it's like not even, from the grand scheme of the league, but like on the specific team he was on, a Colts team that was very tight end centric. And that's how the Browns have operated. Like, the Browns love featuring their tight ends. And there's a lot of question marks at receiver besides Amari Cooper. And when they play outside in the cold, like, Amari Cooper's like, bye. Like, I have no interest in playing. So I love David Njoku there. We're hitting on these late round tight ends, which I think is really, really key to talk about. Round 15, I got Darrell Williams for the Arizona Cardinals. I just think that he's going to be the primary backup to James Conner if and when inevitably Conner goes down with an injury, because he is the type of running back that just embraces contact, especially behind a really, I would say, a poor offensive line in Arizona. Conner is going to get a lot of abuse as their main running back. And I think there's just going to be times where Darrell Williams is going to have a role. And last year in the Chiefs offense, the dude balled out like 18.3 touches per game, 19 fantasy points per game in 6 games as the clear-cut starter. People are citing James Conner's stats as the starter without Chase Edmonds in a 6-game sample size, and it looks nearly identical to what Darrell Williams did. So yes, the question marks are, is it Darrell? Is it Eno Benjamin? I really think that Eno is more of the Chase Edmonds type of player that would play alongside James Conner, whereas Darrell Williams, I think, is someone that they're going to actually trust with, the RB1 workload if and when Conner goes down with an injury.
No, I love the Darrell Williams call. He's one of my favorite late round running backs as well. Just, that Connor's going to get the goal line work. And if he goes down, Darrell Williams is going to get the goal line work. And he's shown as a capable pass catcher. There's a lot of ways in which Darrell Williams could succeed. Okay, round 16. We're getting to the bitter end here, Andrew. Round 16, my pick is Curtis Samuel, 190th overall, wide receiver, 82 off the draft board. And Curtis Samuel has never seen lower than a 19.8% target rate. So he may not be playing full complement of snaps, but when he's on the field, he's getting 20+% of the snaps. And even last season, when he was inefficient and hurt, 24.3% target rate. When he's on the field, he's going to get targets. And this is a player who 99th percentile 40-yard dash, 92nd percentile speed score. He's got speed on speed and speed. And if he's healthy, there's a player who can explode. We saw back in 2020, he was wide receiver 27 fantasy points per game. And he only had 3 receiving touchdowns. Like, he can do it all, running and receiving on a Washington team that is hungrier. They went out and they got Carson Wentz. They drafted Jahan Dotson. And I think there's a lot of weapons and ways in which this Washington team can succeed. And if they're scoring, Curtis Samuel is going to be part of it.
Never finished worse than wide receiver 43 in a season where he's played at least 13 games. So I think it's free money here.
At 82, absolutely.
Yeah. The only reason he's there is just because he wasn't like good enough to like get the, oh, well, he got injured. He falls in the category of he got injured and then like you just get thrown in the trash.
Yep.
Like
he got injured preseason and then just didn't recover.
Yeah. And then, people just are like, oh, whatever. And then that's why he's wide receiver 82. Just right. Because people are just like, oh, whatever. I kind of forgot about that guy.
But he's not even 26 yet.
Yeah. So, no, I think that's a really good call.
Okay.
Round 17. So I didn't comment on the Jamison Crowder thing or your pick in round 12 just because I wanted to talk about Isaiah McKenzie. And, I think it's really a matter of, who is the starting slot receiver for the Bills. And right now there's enough smoke that I'm just concerned that it isn't Jamison Crowder. Initially, when they first signed him, that's what I thought. I thought it was going to be Crowder. So it's at least shocking to me to see and to get reports that it's not Crowder that is starting. And I figured it would be, okay, McKenzie has to push Crowder out of the starting role, where it now seems to me where it's reversed. And that's concerning for me with Crowder in round 12 versus, okay, now I can take McKenzie. It's like, because we both know that the role is really good for that slot. Like, there's no debate there, but it's just a matter of, okay,
who's going to be in that role?
Yeah, who is going to be in that role? And I feel less certain that it is going to be Crowder, and I feel more comfortable taking a guy like McKenzie now in round 17 opposed to Crowder in round 12 until we see a little bit more of, okay, like when the starters are out, oh, it is Crowder, like he's the guy. Okay, that makes sense.
To be fair, this is the first week of training camp and he's hurt and blah, blah, blah. But,
Like Crowder's hurt? You mean like how he hasn't played 16 games once in the last 4 seasons hurt? Yeah. That's the other thing too with Crowder. Like he has not been healthy.
he does have the soft tissue issues. I agree. McKenzie's not a bad pick either. I don't disagree with that. If you're
Bill's offense, like, and the thing is too, we're talking about best ball. It's like when McKenzie's had his big games, week 17 of the last week 17 and week 16. So he could literally do nothing for your entire lineup. Jamison Crowder misses the last 4 weeks, and McKenzie fills in for that slot and has a bunch of big games. And can be your difference maker in the championship weeks.
All right. We'll get to the last one, and then we'll call it here. Zay Jones is one of my round 18 picks. And now, like, you can go any which way you want. And my recommendation when you're actually drafting is pick some players that will differentiate you. Like the 1%, the 5%, the 3%, or the completely undrafted players. Like, that's what separates you from the field. And Zay Jones right now is 209th overall, wide receiver 92 off the board. He and like Laviska Shenault are going really, really late, and I like alternating between those two. Last year, Zay Jones, a 19.4% target rate, and it just seemed like he was Derek Carr's guy after the Henry Ruggs situation, unfolded and Ruggs is no longer part of the team, that Zay Jones really stepped up. And it seems like in Jacksonville, things are trending the right way, that Peterson's running a good team there. Trevor Lawrence is taking steps forward. At least that's what we hope and pray, and for all my ETN shares, anyways. But Zay Jones is an interesting play here at the end, just because of all the targets he got and commanded near the end of his time in Vegas.
Yeah, I think that Zay Jones. Look, dude, like how many guys can you get that are going to be on the field like all the plays in round 18? That's all I need from Zay Jones. Like pass heavy offense. He's going to be a starter in an offense that should be not just pass heavy, but also better than it was last year. Whereas you're taking shots on guys that may get cut, may not even be on like the team, could get traded, like are not even playing. Where Zay Jones, I think you're banking points with Zay Jones here. And I like that, especially based on how your roster is constructed. It's like, hey man, like I'm a little thin at receiver just from, you took, guys that are injured or suspended or something like that. I need someone to kind of like backfill my roster just with some production. Zay Jones is that guy.
All right. That brings us to round 18. Are there any other like last round players that you'd like taking before we end today's pod here, Andrew?
Man, that is a loaded. I mean, it used to be like Julio Jones, but that ship has sailed. So I guess like you got to mention like Will Fuller at this point because it's like
he's the next domino to fall.
Yeah, it's like he is the next free agent.
Or Cole Beasley.
Cole Beasley. It's like no one wants to draft him because they have
Justin Jackson.
They have the little FA next to them. It's like, no one wants to draft. Like Justin Jackson, I think could like end up. I feel like he's going to be a giant. I don't know. I think that's where he needs to end up. He needs to be a giant or something. I don't know what they're doing. I mean, Brian Daboll looked like he hated Matt Breida last year, and I don't know why the Giants decided to bring him back. I don't know if Will Fuller would be someone that I would keep an eye on just because the longer it is, that people are just like kind of like souring, on trying to take a shot on him. And then the other guy is actually someone else we talked about on last time I was on here was Braxton Berrios. Dude, Zach Wilson loves him, dude.
He does.
They literally love each other. And I mean, there's going to be games where Berrios gets like double-digit targets, like whether it's because of injuries. Whenever Berrios has played the last 2 years, like I know you're a target guy, like he's gotten really high target shares when he's been, a full starter in that offense. So I know that Denzel Mims is like popping off all over the place in Jets because he does this every single year. But Braxton Berrios is someone again that
he's in the best shape of his life, right, Andrew? God help
always,
us.
Baby, always.
All right. Well, thank you, Andrew, for hopping on in. You can find Andrew's work at FantasyPros, FantasyPros.com, and you can follow Andrew on Twitter at Andrew Erickson _
Skin, baby. Let's go.
All right, let's go. All right. On behalf of Andrew, I'm Bradley. Thanks for listening to the Best Bell Fantasy Football Podcast. You can follow the channel on YouTube, give us the subscribe, and also like it on the Apple Podcast, Spotify, anywhere you listen to your podcasts. Have a great one. Good luck in the best ball streets, everybody.